Well, let's pick back up. Fingers crossed that won't happen again. Sorry, everybody. Thank you for bearing with us. But Karl, yeah, this kind of illustrates what you were just saying in terms of versus. I see a lot of folks kind of going the route of having a laundry list of, in some cases, even having tiers and saying, okay, here's your line item list of services. That's not the approach that you were taking. Is that something that you did right away, or is this kind of an evolution?
It was an evolution. It didn't occur to us. We just saw how it wasn't working, right? And so we left the concept of the what's sometimes referred to as the precious metal plan a long time ago. But we did try that and do that in our MSP business many years ago. But we then got to the spot of like, this doesn't make sense. Either they need this or they don't. Either it's right or it's wrong. And we got to the spot where, you know what? I mean, this is just an overall opinion. I think a lot of us IT owners are IT guys. Nobody has an MBA. Nobody's like particularly trained in sales. I mean, there are ones out there that are, but not in my world. And I think a lot of us are technicians like me running a business. We fundamentally just didn't know how to sell correctly. We didn't know that when you give up something and just start giving things away, you're really selling your value short. And ultimately, being a provider is a value sell. And to be honest, if you just start throwing things in, or if you don't show the value, you're doing more work, you're making less money, and the customer's seeing you as less valuable. These are really big problems. So it's really honestly about learning how to sell correctly, if you ask me, to avoid the worst, better, and best plan concept. It should be, this is what we recommend. And if you want to deviate from that, we need to have a good conversation. And I'll never let them take something without me taking something either. I never make that not an equal negotiation. It's like, if they want to remove something, then that's going to have to change on my end too. But the point is that that process of giving them those kind of choices is basically saying, you really should have this, but here, have something less that you really don't. You'll be lacking, but you'll get to pay less. It's a dumb answer. I apologize if that offends anybody. I just think it's the wrong way to sell.
It's like selling a car without seatbelts. Technically, will the car still run? Sure. Yeah, you might run through the windshield.
Right. That's a good example.
I want to pull back just, we can dive into some other specific suggestions here in a second, but I want to go back to this doc and look at this this chart that we have here. And this is something I just whipped up. This is not comprehensive at all, just to get a conversation started. But I'm curious, all of you guys, in terms of thinking about, okay, if people do decide to go, we have a separate cybersecurity offering. I've seen some folks, including some consultants who are giving advice to the community, suggesting, okay, you can go the tiered approach. And that begs the question, okay, what in this day and age should be standard? What are you actually comfortable with clients turning down? And I've seen some kind of scary examples where in some cases people say, something like MFA is something that's part of their premium security offering. And that implies that you're okay with customers who don't have that. It goes back to, I guess, your point, Karl, about you're going to have some clients who need a higher level of security than others, and that makes sense. But what do you guys think in terms of what actually shouldn't be on the table? It should be, okay, this needs to be standard. If our clients don't want it, then they're either not for us, or we're going to make them sign a waiver or whatever, things like that.
Yeah, so...
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Karl. I got really excited when you showed the Nist cybersecurity framework, because my personal opinion is that is the framework that outlines what should be included in the base package. You need to have ways to identify your assets and keep them up to date and scan for vulnerabilities. You have to protect them with your, firewalls, your DNS filters, your antivirus programs. You need to be able to detect problems and respond to them. And then when it all hits the fan, you have to be able to recover. And if those elements are not included in your core base offering, you're really doing your customers a disservice. A lot of the solutions that are getting added on, those, trainings and extra filters and, cybersecurity awareness, phishing tests, these are all great things. But if you're missing a chunk out of that Nist framework, you're trying to drive with a flat tire. And that is detrimental and really doing a disservice for the end customer.
Yeah, and I would add to that when you look at like the list of table stakes versus what's included in the base, I think our table stakes is a lot more aggressive than most I've seen out there as competition. Like I pretty much everything on your list I include as table stakes except incident response and pen testing. And I think pen testing is a little disingenuous. If you're playing blue team, you shouldn't also play red team. You should have an actual truly objective party taking a swing at it. And so, you can't play both sides of the fence legitimate. You can use it as a simulation and test, but it's not really a true measurement for the customer of what you're doing to defend them. And so, but the other things I would add in here too, which is not a tool. Every one of these kind of links back to some tool, but it's your own process. Like it's great to get a firewall, but I found that when we install a firewall and apply our standards, it's very different than I see a lot of other firewalls deploy. Like we have certain things that are included in every firewall configuration about locking down authentication, about the way we configure remote access, about the geo IP filtering, the way we configure the content filtering, the way we set up the IPS, the way we set up the application filtering, the QoS. All that's part of our standard. So it's not just firewall; it's all the things around that you do. As an example, and I would add another one into the list, which is change management, which is a procedural thing. It's not a tool for that specifically, but that's a really big piece in good IT and good security too.
Yeah, that's a great point. And actually, if you don't mind, I want to make a last comment there. And so me being the director of the SOC, being the director of threat operations, I'm constantly working with customers who are potentially compromised or in the middle of an actual compromise that we're responding to. And what I find during these conversations is that the MSPs, they're aware of the technologies, they're aware of the protections, and they say the same thing every single time. Well, we had a VPN appliance. We had this enabled. We had this. But again, it goes back to change management processes. We had the firewall enabled to VPN access, but we didn't have multi-factor authentication on the users, and we didn't have any dark web monitoring. So we didn't know there was credentials out there for the domain admin, and that's how they got in, right? So there's all these things that as you're going through what your stack is and what your pragmatic stack is, how does it work? How does it fit? And how can I actually benefit from employing all the protections from it? Because it could be a hindrance, right? There's a lot of organizations that I've talked to that said, I was just doing a really quick change. I opened up RDP on the server and I forgot to open RDP because my son walked into my office, right? That's great, but it's horrible for them because literally, maybe 2 hours later, they're getting knocks on their front door from Russia, China, Netherlands. And it's just because of a simple change that they made. Oh, I'm going to go in here, change RDP, and then I'll close it later. Well, I forgot to close it because there's no process to actually verify that we're doing things correctly. And that's a big component to being secure in 2021, if you will.
What he said.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, since we're talking about selling, how do you sell that? So these other things, it's easy to sell. We do this. We give you, we have your managed firewall, we have EDR, we have all this other stuff. That's easy. Selling your own processes and your people, how do you do that?
Well, yeah.
Really,
go ahead.
No, it's funny. We have similar backgrounds. You go ahead, and then I'll embellish.
Oh, I'm sorry. This was kind of the case for me when I started in the MSP space too. I find it's like kind of a similar motion. Like back in the day when BDRs became the new thing to sell everybody, it kind of just feels like that again, which is the customers fundamentally don't understand why it shifted or what's changed. It's very uncertain to them. And so the best way to get them to buy correctly and to do the things that are really the things you'd recommend is to tell them why. Which is to educate them. And so your sales cycle process should be about teaching them what they don't know, helping them understand what has fundamentally changed, and then helping them understand how you uniquely can solve that issue. And so that's really the major sales cycle. In fact, if you want a book that explains how to do that, check out the Challenger Sales book, because it kind of goes through that model. But the whole concept is that I want the customer to know everything they can about cybersecurity that they'll bear and stand, because I know if they do that, they'll want to buy services from me because I'm providing a more complete offering.
And what do you want to add to that, Jamie?
Yeah, so I think having a really solid and repeatable process that you can guide your customer through. So when I always was going through the sales process, I had like a little diagram that I would show them, hey, we're here right now. We need to assess, learn about your environment. Then we're going to consult with you and put the recommendations in place that we think are going to work the best in your environment. And then we're going to demonstrate that value and show you why it's going to work. And if you guide them through that process, you show them the map and then lead them along the way, they'll start to believe you when you say something, if you follow through and you can do it in a repeatable manner. And that builds trust. Because at the end of the day, they do need to trust in the process. They do need to understand that you're a whole solution and not just a list of tools. They can buy a list of tools all day, every day. They don't know what tools they even need. And that's why they're hiring you. And that's very important.
Right. In fact, the details are confusing to them, right? And so it's more about helping them understand the principles of decision making. But I couldn't agree more. It's like we call it the SnapTech way, which starts with an assessment phase where you're catching the identify things, and then you're moving into the things that are gaps in what they need. So you have this gap analysis you come back with, and then you help them build out a plan that sustains itself over the next few years, and say, we're here, this is where we have to go. But the real trick is you put everything in the context of risk management. You don't say, if you don't do this, everything's going to blow up and die. I can't believe you have this port open. How do you wake up in the morning and look at yourself? And it's just an unproductive way of having the conversation. So to me, it's all about let's examine the risk. Let's quantify this a little bit and let's make choices around it. And then together we're going to get to this spot. And I'll tell you why I make the recommendations I do, because I believe that it's too risky not to. And that's really, so, risk selling, using assessments is an incredibly important tool. And then having a clear identified process that we can show them where you start and where you're going to get to. That's what I mean when I say an annual budget. I don't sell individual tools, but I sell the process over a year as an example.
That makes sense. And going back to that idea of what should be in the offering, and clearly you have the advice of check out Nist, go to a higher authority. We've had Justin Reimuth, who is the founder of TechRug, which sells helps MSPs get cyber insurance, and he brings up that point all the time. Make it so it's not just you, the MSP saying, here's what I think we should do. It's not just your opinion. You're pointing to a higher authority. And that's what makes Nist or some of these other frameworks so important. Jamie, I see you nodding your head.
You're reading my presentation that I have for teaching my customers is build a playbook and then tell them the story. The other thing I use is, instead of just talking about all these nuts or bits and bytes and all these scare stories, I like to tell a story of when we actually protected somebody from a breach, and then ask them to imagine if those protections aren't there, what would that have meant to the customer. There's a statistic right now that the average ransomware demand is $42,000. That's someone's salary on your team. And if you had to just decide between paying a hacker or paying your employee whose family depends on you, which one do you want to pay? So we can make decisions in your business that are set up to empower you to not have to be put in that decision. And that's what you should do.
What about, Karl, for the folks who are setting off, maybe they're in early days or they're looking to kind of build out their initial offering. So there's this idea of what do you choose? And then the idea of okay, you're going to have to pass this cost on to a customer. And it seems like going back to that chart, there's the tools that are really built around software that kind of become commoditized. It's what's easily flown into that standard category that we're talking about. And then it seems like another way to think about the separation for me is maybe not every single customer needs to have the managed SOC happening. And for you, you said that is a standard thing for you, and for some other MSPs, depending on what your clientele is, maybe it's managed SOC, managed SIEM, whatever that is. But it does seem like it's a pretty clear delineation between the stuff that anyone can buy in terms of software versus, okay, we've got people who are true cybersecurity specialists, whether that's on staff or external. and that's not cheap. And so the price there, I mean, I guess take me back to when you're building out your offering. Did you decide, because you're going to go in that route and offer that, were there some clients that you had to let go of, or were there some that, I mean, if we're talking about a price change, when you're adding like dark web monitoring, that's a big difference between that and like adding on a SOC in terms of the cost and the sticker shock clients are going to get.
Well, honestly, I do a lot of industry advocacy, and I got involved in a think tank, actually with our friend Andrew Morgan, who introduced us to each other. And one of the jobs of that think tank was to go to the providers and explain to them the MSP space and how we need their products, but we need them in a way that an MSP can consume them. And so I began working on advocacy for that for a long time ago, because I knew I needed this for my clients. And then it got to a spot where it was doable to sell it to every client. And so I think that's where it is now. I don't think it's a huge leap to ask them to add it like it used to be. That being said, I mean, I think it's a fair debatable point whether every client needs that level or what that engagement looks like. But I don't like clients running around without threat detection. I don't like them running around without that additional check that alarm system that tells me when somebody got through. There's just too much happening. I've seen too much. And so for me, it's just, I can understand from a cost standpoint why some people see it that way. But in the grand scheme of things, it's probably not, I don't know, 10% of your IT budget with your customer. It's not the biggest move ever to try to make with a customer. And the other thing is like, we very much didn't want to give it away. And I can understand the temptation to just do that. So our process was to say, okay, from now forward, every new client has sold this. And every quarter in our QBR, we bring it up and we ask them where we can put it on the roadmap. And eventually we get there. And I think the SOC SIM took us almost 3 years before the penetration was really where we wanted it to be. But other things were easier. But that's something that just takes time. I mean, some of our clients we've had for 20 years, and they're still like, you guys have this ticketing system now, let alone, all this other stuff. Because when we first started, I didn't even have that, right? Right. So, it does, there is a journey to be made, but there is a value. And honestly, it's easier to sell to your current customers than it is to somebody you haven't met. I just don't forget that,
100%. Yeah. Jamie, when you're talking with your clients who are going through this, or your Blackpoint's customers, I guess we should be clear too, Blackpoint provides managed SOC services. Right. Are a lot of your customers, is this something that they've offered for the first time, or is it something that they're offering, it's a new thing that they're going to be pushing out to clients?
So we see a mix. There are customers that have been with a different SOC that weren't getting the services that they needed, and so they'll switch to us, in which case their clients already have it, and it's just like switching antivirus, right? You go from one service to another and everyone gets it. It's great. But there are a really high number that are realizing that the risk of not offering 24/7 in response to threats is a detriment to their business. It leaves them at risk, because when the computers start getting ransomware at 4 a.m., is your team looking at a portal, seeing those alerts coming on and responding in real time? My team does. We'll kill the malicious processes, we'll detain the compromised machines, and we'll put your customer in a much better spot. It's like having a fire suppression system in your building. If you can sprinkle right down onto the problem and get that stopped right where it started, you're going to have a whole lot damage to deal with the next day. For those reasons and the prevalence of ransomware today, more and more of my partners are including Security Operations Center as a base part of their offering, because it's the ability to detect and respond is core elements in this. And
it's a risk point of view, right? It's just how much risk do you want with your clients? Yeah. Do you want to be going through that goat rodeo firestorm? Either you believe in the product or you don't,
Right. And it's okay not to, but the ones who don't believe in it are working really, really hard to make sure they don't have a bad situation where the customer's looking at them saying, I thought you already did this for us.
Right. Yeah. And whether you sold it to them or not, whether they signed your disclaimer that says that you're not going to be held responsible, you can bet for sure they're going to hold us responsible, that you can bet for sure that they think you do it.
Yeah, well, and remember, I started this conversation by saying I used to work for a managed service company before I joined the Blackpoint team. I had these conversations with the end customers. I had to go to the client that was paying like $50 an endpoint and explain to them that our new prevailing rate was $150 an endpoint. And, you need to show some massive changes to help walk them up in their contracts. And one of those that we relied on to help make that change was the 24/7 incident response. So it helped add value that the customer could understand and see, and that's useful too.
But it's smarter to bundle it and talk about it as a total solution than each individual point solution. That's where you lose them.
Yeah. You go through, when you try that checklist approach and each quarterly business review, you're like, let's add this now. Oh gosh, it's hard. It's brutal. So much better to go in with a package and say, this is what we're offering today. And you would like this, right? Yeah, yep. The sum is closed.
But let's be clear, though. I think there's a common problem in the industry or just even small business in general, because I'm a member of like the EO group, and I work with companies that aren't IT companies. I see other small businesses and how they behave. We all have a real tendency to buy a tool to think we saved our problem, but then we never embrace and operationalize and proceduralize that tool. It doesn't become part of our culture. It doesn't become part of what we do. And so my opinion is that you start with security by internalizing that you are a security-focused company. And then it comes to how are you going to solve it? The framework is the most comprehensive way of approaching it, and that tells you where you have your gaps and where you need to find your solutions and your tools to get you to a comprehensive offering. It is without a doubt that the hours and expertise that went into things like the Nist framework are accurate. It is the complete picture. And if you're not addressing them in meaningful ways, you probably don't have the right culture about it.
And I'd argue, too, it's a way for you to lose business to other IT service providers in your area who are doing those things. If you have a customer and they have 3 bids on the table, and you're having a complete framework security conversation, and you're offering 24/7 managed service and managed security, and showing them your framework and your process and your people and your passion, and the other one's showing them a list of tools, the ones who pick that list of tools over what you've got to offer, they're not worth your time.
Yeah, the security is definitely the differentiator, and it will continue to be for probably another year or two, and then it will be just fundamental table stakes. I mean, it doesn't feel like it's that far away. And, we got on this bandwagon back in, 2012, 13, and 14 range, something like that. And it's been a great ride for us, but we see the entire industry moving there now. And so it's one of these things where, you should be asking yourself, how does this sit? I can't tell you almost without a doubt when we win a new managed service deal, it is almost always they say, because we felt we would be more secure with you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Karl, you bring up a point with things being table stakes. I've got a question here in the doc that I wanted to pose to you and everyone in the audience too. Is the term MSSP going to be around? Are people going to be using that in a couple of years?
Yeah, it's a funny thing. Like, so what is MSP but a type of IT? To me, it's funny because I remember back in the day, I thought I was going to become an MSSP, take the journey from MSP to MSSP. Then I quickly like, no, I don't want to be this only security company that doesn't do all this other IT stuff. So I guess I don't want to be that. But so then I adopted the point of view of like, look, this is just good IT. And so for me, I don't know what the relevance long-term of the managed security service provider. I don't know that it plays out, at least in the market that I work in. Maybe it does in some kind of enterprise place. I think for me, the most meaningful definition or distinction between an MSP and MSSP now is, do you want to be only security and work with an MSP or a local IT department as opposed to having the whole picture? That's like the only thing meaningful to me now, on the differentiation.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. And we've got Ross asking the question, what happens after cybersecurity is commoditized? kind of getting back to that point, I mean, to your point too, things becoming table stakes, a lot of the software anyway, the tools, those are easy things to commoditize. But going back to your and Jamie's points, it seems like people and processes are not the things that get commoditized, but they're also the difficult things for you to really get across when someone's just visiting your website, for example, or just having an intro conversation with you.
Well, the SnapTech way never gets commoditized. I'm the only one that offers it. Right?
There you go.
So, I mean, it isn't about the tools. It's about how we approach it and who we are. That's the classic value sell conversation. You could say, what happens when MSP becomes commoditized? Well, there are some selling it in a commoditized way. I say, that's too bad. I think that's a hard way to go. Hard to make money, hard to be successful, in my opinion. But it's my opinion. What can I say? But I would not say that we're commoditized in the MSP space, and I don't think we will be going forward just because we have our own unique way of expressing who we are,
Well, and cybersecurity is constantly changing. The game's changing. Right now, we're talking about protecting computers and servers. Next month, we're going to be talking about protecting cloud applications and, protecting your Microsoft 365 environments. And that edge, while, how we do it and what exactly we're doing is going to change, the fact that people need experts who are living this life and passionate about it, that won't change. So your people, your processes, your passion, that's your brand.
Wait a minute. Are you saying Windows 2000 didn't end all technology problems, when it came out? Are you saying that technology changes all constantly? That's incredible.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, I am saying those things. And yes, it's a cliche, but it's true.
No,
so it's good for us.
I'm trying to tease you, but that really is what
it.
it comes down to. It's like, is there really ever a place where this stops and it becomes so well known and understood that people can go find the same service from somebody else cheaper? Not really. It never really is going to end. I don't see that cycle ever changing. I mean, we have to constantly evolve our business models. It feels like every 2 years to me,
Absolutely. And that's why having such strong partners like Ninja RMM and using tools that are fresh and growing and changing and secure, it's really important. And it's the MSP's job to constantly be evaluating that, pushing the needle, and having close relationships with your partners so that you can explain what do you need today and how is it different than what you needed 6 months ago.
Kind of want to shift gears a little bit here and go back to the topic here with selling, because I think if we all look, like, we've all seen these, right? Like when people are selling security, there's a tendency all of a sudden for everyone to at least project that they're like SWAT teamed out, like they're military, like there's like cyber warfare, like all this stuff, and get really, really serious. And it completely goes against what a lot of people consider, how they would market their MSP, taking security out of the picture. It's, emphasizing that we are friendly, we're easy to work with. We really are close to our customers, we're reliable, all those things. Any recommendations, and maybe Jamie, we can go back to you because you work with a variety of customers. For some people, go in with the whole approach where everything's black and there's people in hoodies and all that stuff. Maybe it can work and kind of go with your brand. But what about the folks who have a different brand than that, and they're trying to go into more serious security offerings? Have you had any experience or advice for those people?
Yeah, so, anyone who's going to see any of our marketing material, we have some fun with it, right? We have the bold, dark colors and the, hoodies and all of that. And I would say customers expect a certain level of that cool, edgy factor when you come to a cybersecurity solution, but there's nothing wrong with taking it a step back and really focusing it on that framework, really making it a polished and professional rollout. Because at the end of the day, it's not hacker warfare, fingers flying across keyboards, down in the trenches, firing shots across the border. It's, oh, look, RDP's open, and now you've got a IP address that is over in Romania connecting to your domain controller. Should we kill that process? yeah, we should kill that process. Okay, let's do it. Like that's how we operate on a day-to-day basis. Then we notify the partner what happened, and then the partner's job is to go to the customer, explain they had an incident, how it happened, and how they're going to stop it from happening again. And that relationship, the feet on the ground, the conversation, the trust that you build day to day with your bedside manner, if you would, man, that's the true value of the MSP. That's what you do for the customer. Let us be the spooky, serious security people. You build those relationships and focus on keeping your people happy.
That's interesting.
People do business with people. It comes down to that simple.
There's I've heard some other advice too of using stats, for example, right? Like there's nothing wrong with showing a stat that was put out in a report or linking to an article that's kind of making that point for you. But yeah, like you're saying, Jamie, let someone else do it for you, and then you get to be the reassuring element versus you coming in and saying, the house is going to be on fire, like everything is doomed, Russia's coming for you, that sort of thing.
Well, and the media makes this worse. You turn on the news, you hear about a breach like Garmin or whatever has happened lately, and they make it sound like a hacker infiltrated their systems and then spread like wildfire on their networks, and the users were unaware that their systems were compromised. And there's elements of truth to that. I'm not saying media makes this up, but there is actually a really established hacker timeline and process that people who are breaking into networks use in order to break into networks. And there's geeky experts like Wilfredo, who got dropped from the menu and probably got hacked by Russia, who understand that process and demystify it, and they put processes in place to catch it and respond and counter it. And that's anyway, it should be hopeful to people to know that there are experts out there that are doing the good work and fighting the fight successfully and winning.
Yeah, I think that's always like an eye-opening conversation because people think of people in a bunker doing something or whatever, but really they're in an office complex. It might be in the Ukraine. They come into work, and for their job, they're supposed to call and demand ransom from people all day. And it's a weird thing to think, but it really is more of a business than it is anything else, and it's very profitable, right? And so it's about how do you keep that from happening. But it's very different than the hoodies. It's people going to work,
I do. I've thought about this quite a bit, like how there should be a sitcom where it's basically an office park, and it's just like The Office, except it's cyber criminals. Yeah, to your point.
I want that to be a thing. We should start a little YouTube channel where we put that together.
So hashtag that's what she said.
So here we go. This is an appropriate time for Sean Lardo from OIT to come on. So Sean, hey, how you doing, sir?
Fantastic. I'm glad to see you brought a fellow good hair person on the show finally. Yeah.
Well, Sean, it's good. It's good for you to jump in. And I think Tom was specifically asking for you to jump in. I wanted you here too, of course, as always.
Thanks, Nathan. I appreciate that.
And it's because you're on the sales side. And so
yes.
You've been listening into this, and I don't know, any takeaways from your end in terms of combating like this idea that security has to be this, there's a tendency to really want to wake people up and kind of shake them a little bit. But really, like, is that the right approach, or is there other ways to get people's attention in a more kind of productive way?
Well, there's no real wrong way to do it, as long as you're doing something. Let's start with that first. And actually, some good talk points that I heard that were said just recently here during this webinar was people do business with people, value add sell conversation, and how we do business is the right way to do business, right? And those are great talk points, because it's kind of like if you hire a plumber because you have a leak in your house, you have a leak, you need to have fixed. The plumber comes and tells you exactly what needs to happen. They tell you what they're going to do. They're going to go fix it. They don't get into the back end of talking about what pipe they're going to get, what size of anything they're going to get, what tools they're going to use. None of that occurs, right? Because at the end of the day, all you want to know is they're going to fix your leak, right? And if they're And long-term plumbers will say, we have to hurry up and get this done, because if not, you're liable to flood your house here, and you're going to cause this damage. And then you're going to have to pay for new drywall and new electrical work. And you see how it just becomes a simple conversation about, I'm just helping you. And whether it's cybersecurity or in my world of VoIP or whatever, I don't care, take your pick. It's about simplifying what's going on. The fact of the matter is there's already a ton of commercials out there that scare people about cybersecurity. There's a ton of commercials. People, I mean, hell, we still hear about SolarWinds, and talking about being hacked. So it's not like people haven't heard this. So why not just leverage the existing resources you have? Okay. Your job is to translate. That's my job, is to translate when you're in sales and say why this is a problem to you and how I'm going to make it not ever happen to you, because they already saw the commercial anyway. So don't waste your time. And you have a simple conversation like this because they want to be able to trust you and like you. Value add is I heard being said about different features and taking down things that are in other countries and whatnot. That's great and all for the MSP to know that, but the end user doesn't know what the hell you're talking about. That's a foreign language. So speak English or Spanish or wherever the hell you are. Just speak to them in that way about things they understand. Okay. And actually and I think the most common problem people ask though, or do MSP wise, is they don't have the legitimate discovery call or the assessment to actually show them, again, in English, where the problems are and what they need to do to prevent that, to be safe, and what it means to them as a business, not as a one-off. But if you don't, back to the plumber, if you don't fix this leak, it's going to go down through the walls, through the rafters. You're going to have to replace all these other things. That's going to cost you this much money. If you don't have that conversation like that, and that's a business conversation, as even if you don't own your own business, as a homeowner, as a parent, or whatever, you always have to talk about the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is future costs to you as a person if you don't take action. That's it. And they don't need to know what the action is for the MSP part. They just know it's being taken care of. It's kind of like buying homeowners insurance. Have you ever read your homeowner's insurance policy? If you say you did, you're lying to me. You're all lying, okay?
Nightly.
There's a bunch of stuff in there. I think I even have, like, if a deer runs into my house protection, for all I know. I don't, but again, they told me I need it and it's protecting me and I'm good to go. Right. And so if you're going to sell this and you're going to do this, you need to actually discover what they need to do, assess them, and talk to them in their terms.
Great suggestions. I saw you nodding, Tom. That's why I kind of jumped to you.
Yeah. I wanted to also give something real practical here. Every MSP owner has gone through this. In your agreement and in your materials you take out to the client, you might put in the name of technologies. You might end up selling the tech. And I want to tag on to what Sean said, because it's not about the tech. And there's a big advantage in being kind of loose in your agreement about, you say what you're solving and what you're giving them, but then you also give yourself room to put in other tech. I know that early on, I would sell backup, for example, and I would tell the client all about this great backup and what it would do. And then I'd come back to them 6 months later and I'd be like, well, actually, I'm going to put a new backup in. And they would be like, well, I thought this was the greatest thing. What happened? Why are you switching me out? And so when you're talking about this, focus on what it's going to take away from them. You're not going to have to worry about this anymore. We're going to take care of you. It's on us. And we're going to provide the adequate security that does these things for you. But don't get too deep into the actual products or what they do or the technical. Try to stick with how it's going to solve a business problem for them and make their lives easier.
Yeah, sell solutions, not speeds and feeds.
Absolutely. And also don't short side yourself and your value and your cost. That's another bad problem people make when they go in the doors trying to sell. Determine a price of your services. No matter who you're using for vendors is irrelevant, because the customer doesn't know that. If you say it's going to cost $1,000 for this, it's $1,000 today, tomorrow, and the next day. Okay. The only way, and again, no matter who the vendors are, if you switch vendors, like Tom said, 6 months from now, I'm using this vendor, it's irrelevant to the customer. They don't know who they are. I don't know. My dentist has never heard of Datto. My dentist has never heard of Ninja RMM. My dentist has never heard of. So, for me to say those words is like, okay, that's great. It doesn't matter, right?
What about with security though? Is there a point, especially maybe with depending on who you're selling to, if you're dealing with co-managed clients or maybe other larger customers who are a little bit more technical? I use that term loosely. Have you been challenged at all, like Karl, like with what you're using? Because security is out there all the time, because we do see ads from all these companies. There's a point in the chat too where earlier where someone was saying, what I do have actually clients who ask me, am I using this particular vendor? Does that come up with you at all, or no?
So I mean, maybe I take a slightly different standpoint. Like when we sell somebody SOC as a service or MDR, we call it the SnapTech SOC as a service, it's SnapTech MDR. So we don't like specifically name vendors, and we don't sell it as a vendor, but they also can know all of our vendors if they want to. I don't mind putting my stack up against it. And so yeah, we use this one or that one, or if they say you should use this one. And I'll tell you what I always say to the customers is, look, we evaluate our vendors and we look at independent things like Forrester and Gartner. And if they're in the Magic Quadrant, I'm going to pick one of those, or I'm going to pick one that I have a good reason for being a challenger, or something that I think is the right thing. And that's what I think today, but in 3 years that could change, and I'm going to change that vendor. We don't change vendors often, but we do it with objective reasoning that I can explain to a customer, right? And so I don't mind. It will come up, especially for the informed vendor, and I don't mind comfortably talking about it. I'm not trying to hide anything.
Right.
I just simply don't think it's important to the sell,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I find that, as someone, I'm not a client. I look at MSP sites a lot of websites, and I notice this, and I always find it interesting when people choose to, what they choose to white label and what they choose not to. Jamie, I'm going to bring you up again. Do you have a sense of kind of how many, is it something that you advise a lot of customers to, have when you're saying that you provide a SOC, we can be completely in the background, or you can shout us out or whatever. Do you have any advice that you give people?
Yeah, so I typically let them decide, but I challenge them to think really carefully about it. Do you want to sell this as your SOC that you created and all the technology that you made yourself? Or do you want to rely on our people and our board? I mean, Wilfredo started this conversation and he's like, well, I worked for the NSA for a bunch of years. We have expertise that we can pull on. Our board, we just lost a board member because he got poached by the current presidential administration. That kind of experience and expertise speaks volumes and lends your solutions weight. So use us, give yourself the flexibility to pick another partner if your needs change or your clients' needs change, but rely on your partners who are experts in the field and use their names when it makes sense to help you be successful.
See, I think the fundamental difference here is I don't market based on a name or a brand. I market us, right? And that's who I'm selling. But I also find it fundamentally deceptive to say we built a SOC or we built an endpoint or we do this. And so to act like we don't use vendors, I think is a really big way to set a relationship off incorrectly. I don't want to feel like I have to hide things. I don't want to feel like they don't understand exactly. I want to be transparent. I want to show them everything we're doing. I am confident that I do it as well or as good as anybody. And what I'm doing is a good choice. I know it because I'm in communities. I see it. And so I don't have a reason to hide. So I want to build relationships. I want to share with them. I want them to know, but that doesn't mean I'm like, I don't bring up vendors, but if they ask, I don't mind talking about it at all, because there's nothing wrong with that. I don't have $1 billion company developing security solutions, but I know how to make them work for you,
Yeah, I think that's important. I mean, my point is not to get too deep into it, but be able to answer questions. And I would certainly use a vendor's information in a sales situation. But I also want to point out to people is to make sure you don't cannibalize your offering when you're trying to get a sale. I know Sean and I had a great conversation about this. And I know I did this early in my MSP career where the client, I wanted to please them so bad that I was willing to take parts of it out. Or I couldn't believe the number of people I saw in the poll which said that they allowed people to sign a waiver and get out of things. I mean, I was astonished by that because especially when it comes to security, you can't afford to let some piece of it go. You're probably putting yourself in a liability situation as well. If you're giving this offering to other clients and then all of a sudden you pull something out and give this to another client and it doesn't really cover all their needs.
I have a quick comment on that because this has been an internal debate. Like my CFO is like, if they keep saying no, get a disclaimer, do this. I feel like maybe some people are doing it successful. I have fundamentally always rejected that notion because it feels like it puts me in the wrong relationship with my customer. It's like I'm knowingly letting them make a bad decision. I'm letting it happen, and supposedly they're saying they're not going to sue me. You know what? If they're going to sue me, they're going to sue me. That's what I've learned. Yeah. And so it's like, I just don't think that it's just like if you have a 36-month term contract, and if they want to go, they'll go. It's just that's the wrong relationship. You should be more on the same page. That you shouldn't have to do that.
But you actually said it. You said value add sell.
For a lawsuit. Go ahead, Sean.
You said you're the one that said value add sell, right? Yeah. That was your line exactly. And that's the truth. Coming back to the only reason why there's disclaimers is people don't have confidence in what they're saying to their customers and providing, either because they didn't do it right in the first place, they didn't address the right needs, they didn't trial close them to make sure they actually get what they need, and they didn't get a buy-in at the end. Because at the end of the day, you're absolutely right. I sell this bottle of water. I can't say, well, you don't get the cap and now it's 10% less. That's not what happens, right? I mean, I don't know if I never saw that in the store. So the fact is, you want this water, you're thirsty? Okay, great. I can give it to you for $10. This is how it works, the end. Now, you're going to buy 1,000 bottles of water? Okay, I'll discount it for 5%. That's different.
Don't forget, there's a big philosophy out there where people will always ask for a discount no matter what, just to see if you're going to bend. And they actually will totally pay your price. So when you get that question, don't squirm. Just hold tight. Know who you are. Know what your offering is. Know its value, and that's what you should offer it at.
Absolutely, and know your competition. Know what they're going in the door with too. That's a fact. They will come to us. They come to us as a vendor all the time for our setup for a white label, right? And I say, why are you charging this much? Why wouldn't we? I just gave you all the reasons. If I do my due diligence in the conversation, I've already explained to you why you're paying this, right? I've heard the word framework used many times. Framework exists in this conversation. Let me lay a framework of what we're here to discuss today. We're here to discuss why you need us, why we want to work together. Are we a good match? If we're not a good match, we're going to find this out by the end of the call. We'll shake hands, part ways, and call it a day. If we do find we're a match, then we're going to go and talk about business then. And then when you're doing it, and if you explain it properly, they already know you've already given the upfront contract in the conversation. They already know they're going to talk about price. You're going to tell them your price, and then you're going to tell them why the price exists the way it does. They're going to challenge you. That's fine. And you can just simply say, I'm sorry, this is the way it goes. You want yeah, you should. And you shouldn't, and you should not waver. You should never waver on any of it. You know what you're worth. You know how much work you put into it. If you're the best, again, I don't know that Lamborghini really does a lot of discounts. I didn't see any promotions recently. I was on Groupon looking. I did not find them on Groupon. Just saying.
I had this very conversation with a partner today. He was talking about a prospect that we were working together. We had done a demo. I was asking how it went. And he's like, oh, well, they were pushing me on price. They said no. So I went back to the table and I went, stripped it down to my very barest, possible offer. And I just kindly took him back to that presentation where, we talk about the cybersecurity framework. I'm like, which elements did you take out? I'm like, you kind of sold them a vehicle with a flat tire because now this isn't going to roll. And he's like, are you telling me I sold them a lemon? I'm like, yes, if they say yes to this, and I'm not being critical and I just want to help. But when you take these pieces out, you lose functionality that is supporting vital business processes, and which ones you want to not happen. And
the other thing, you're protecting your business also, your MSP, and you want to make sure that the offering that you're giving to this client over here, that you can show that you're giving that offering to all these other clients. Otherwise, you can put yourself in a really bad situation.
All I could say is I learned it the hard way. So don't beat yourself up if you're in that spot and you've been doing it. It does work better. And it's just about being more confident in your sales process and who you are. And I feel like for me as a technician out there selling, I had to learn that. I did not need it. Initially, I made these mistakes and I felt like I learned them. I've seen how those clients never work out, how they're never happy, and they always end up costing you more money and you wish you didn't do the deal.
I think that's a great note to wrap up here, guys. We're a little bit over 5. Thank you, everybody, for coming in. Before we leave, though, I want to call out some additional resources. So, Karl, you mentioned the Challenger Sale. Great book for people to read if they want to. If they're more on the technical side, they're looking to build up sales skills. Anything else that you'd point folks to in terms of security resources or sales or anything?
Well, from my perspective, I feel like, making sure you're on all the blogs and the appropriate things to kind of know what's going, so you can always talk topically with people when they want to know the latest that's going on. So there are several different security alerts and things that we sign up for, like the US CERT, FBI InfraGard, and also even things like MSSP Alert that Joe Pannone does. There's a lot of great content there that you can get daily. And then some of our vendors put out some really great security blogs that I really like, and so they kind of keep me in the know. And then the other thing I would say is, it's about focusing on your own culture. So a lot of times it's maybe just even internal leadership needs to be improved in your organization, more discipline, more. So there's some great options there. Like, we're an EOS implemented company. Maybe that's a thing to think about too, because I feel like a lot of our security has nothing to do with our tools. It's just who we choose to behave are and how we behave. So
those are great. Jamie, what about you? I've got open a screen here. I know that you guys have some materials for your partners, but any other resources you want to call out?
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone who is interested in learning more about Blackpoint, you need to just reach out. We'll schedule you a free demo and provide you with a free trial of our technology, so you can try it before you buy it, which is really nice. Also, just a lot of books and reading. I love Smarter, Better, Faster. It's an excellent read if you want to pick that up and sharpen the pencil a little bit. It's a great read.
Nice. I've got a couple things to say. So Sean, actually, you got to jump pretty soon to get ready for Tech Bar.
Yes, I do.
You want to invite folks while you're on?
Yes, the Tech Bar. It's not as professional as this is today. It's not nearly as informative. We host it every other Thursday night, starting at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard. We stream it on Facebook and on YouTube. If you look up OIT VoIP, you'll find it. Hey, subscribe to our YouTube channel because we're really good. And I'll even help you with the book. Also, The Go-Giver.
Nice.
If you guys want to read a good book, The Go-Giver is great because it is about humanizing what you're doing, because you already bust your ass and do a lot of work. I love that. That's awesome.
That's my Go-Giver award right there.
That is awesome. See, and it's a quick read. There isn't a single person here that couldn't sit down for 2.5 hours and finish that book, the first book. So, yes. But yeah, by all means, thank you, Jonathan, for putting up the link for me because I wasn't doing it yet. 6:30 p.m. today. We actually have one of our white label partners that is a guest. We'll bring a couple other people on too. Make sure you have like a bottle of something to drink, not water related. Maybe water basis somewhere, but but that's it. I'm done.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you, Sean. Appreciate that. And I want to call just everybody's attention back to this doc. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom, we got a little funny graphics, blah, blah, blah. We've got some cool upcoming events. We are going to take a little bit of time off from live chats for May, but we'll be back in June. Don't worry. But in the meantime, we got cool events for you. The first one is coming up May the 4th, and we're partnering with OIT, also our friends at Lifecycle Insights and CNWR Consulting. So Jason Slagle, if you guys are familiar in the chat, and we're going to be doing a live interactive incident response, basically workshop. And we're going to be looking at what happened in Rogue One, the Scarif data breach incident, and we're going to be breaking that down. We're going to be actually asking the audience to help us with this, to identify what were the issues, security issues, and let's put together an assessment and a list of recommendations for Lord Vader himself. So don't miss that. That's going to be fun. And then we've got later in the month, on May 19th, another virtual summit. So a lot of you guys in the chat, I recognize Pedro and others were on our Msp Security Summit back in January. We're going to do a similar thing, but this is a broader theme, and we're really looking at helping your customers migrate to cloud environments, moving away from AD, securing distributed workforces, all that good stuff. We're calling it Adapt IT, and that's going to be on May 19th. So there's a link in that doc for you to check out more things there. Very last thing, you can subscribe to MSP Bento. It's the email that goes out every week that's got 5 free resources for you to accomplish something that week as an MSP owner or a technician. And then join our Slack group. We're going to be diving back on and keeping the conversation going. So with that, I'll close things out, but I want to thank everybody. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Karl. Thank you, Sean. As always, thank you, Tom. And thank you, Wilfredo. Sorry we couldn't get you back on. And thanks everybody for bearing with us through the technical difficulties. Hopefully that doesn't happen next time around. But appreciate everybody.
Bye, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Take care.
All right.
Bye
Take
all.
care, everybody. Stay safe.